but I know this. Those of you listening, you have within you the power to change your world and change the world in a way that you would be delighted by. And so I know Al and I are committed to doing that, and I hope that we can be helpful in your journey to do so. So thanks, Al. Let's go change the world.
Can be personified values rather than defendant egos and insecure and miserable egos. If we design that ahead of time and live our life that way, I promise it's been an absolute miracle in my life. In the last 25 years, I've expanded my family to hundreds of people versus just a biological few. I have had the experience of God operating in the world. Not in a religious sense, in a spiritual sense, through everybody, regardless of their belief system, even if they're atheists.
Now, it's great to see you. How are you this morning?
Great, brother. How about you?
I'm doing awesome. It is hard to believe that we are sitting at November 30th of 2023 and how quickly this year has gone by.
Yeah, and how quickly life's going by. I noticed this morning in the paper that Henry Kissinger died at 100. And then we had Rosalind Carter die. And, you and I are in a generation where we're noticing there are people going under the water. It's like we all went down in the water off the USS Indianapolis after delivering the bomb. And sharks are taking some people down or whatever. And to me, it makes the poignancy of time and these conversations so important, Steve.
Indeed. Well, we want to welcome anybody that's watching this episode of our podcast that we've titled Level 4 Conversations. And we thought we'd talk a little bit today about, as we end the year or we head to the end of the year, lots of things and thoughts go through our mind about how do we spend the remainder of this year and look forward to next year. We have the holidays in front of us and so forth. But what is a level 4 conversation all about? And why are we doing this? What's important about spending time in podcasts with two fellows like Al Killeen and Stacey Harding? And we'd love to chat about that. So Al, tell us, why did we come up with this thought of level 4 conversations?
I'll be more than happy to talk about this conceptually and what level 4 is and where it came from. What I think would be an interesting thing I'd like to hear, Stacey, is you're a fresh petri dish. You're someone who, to my knowledge, 6 months ago had never really heard the term level 4. And maybe you had somewhere, but I'll assume you didn't. And then you and I have known each other for a quarter century, but we didn't know each other. We knew a couple of Wizard of Oz presentations across the room, having been in the same industry, and we had our story about each other. And I'm sure it was a benevolent story both directions, but we probably had our stereotypes of this or that. You probably wondered, how this guy with such an effusive, full head of hair could be as successful as he was, or whatever. But in that last 4 months or 5 months or whatever, you came into awareness of this concept of level 4 that led to something I'm deeply grateful for, which is you've decided to commit your considerable talent and experience and wisdom and knowledge and heart to helping other people in the way I've been devoted to doing it for a quarter century. And something about this idea of level 4 was part of the component, I think, of why you made that decision. So maybe you could just tell the listeners briefly a little bit about what shifted for you, and therefore what level 4 has meant to you personally, experientially, before I define it conceptually.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, lots of thoughts go through my mind as we think about that concept and what's happened to me personally, Al. And we have spent a lot of time together over the last 4 months. I think for me, being nearly 40 years into business, nearing what might be the last 0.25% or less of my life, lots of self-contemplation occurs. And it occurred to me that I've spent my entire life trying to engineer outcomes. And as a result of that, it's all been driven by my own self image, my ego, some of it's pride, some of it perhaps greed. And that is not what we would call a level four. You'll explain to the folks that there are different stages of our identity as we travel through life. And I've been stuck in what you might describe as level three, where it's ego driven. It's based upon my perception of myself and what I think others perceive of me, and perhaps what I want them to perceive of me. And it often leads and has led for me to massive disappointments.
Mm.
I shared a post not too long ago in social media about why we get disappointed. And certainly it's because we have certain expectations and then reality doesn't occur just as we expect. And then somewhat we're disappointed. Sometimes we get surprised and it's better. I don't know about you. That hasn't happened a lot in my life. It's usually not the outcome that I was envisioning in my own narrative. And so level four is when my personal belief is that I can move beyond that egocentric identity to an identity that I'm a I'm part of something much bigger than my individual life. That I was created on this earth for a purpose to be part of this world. When we grow up and we're young, sometimes we think about changing the world, and then life happens, and we have to pay bills, and we have to make a living, and we have relationships that are healthy and unhealthy, and then all of a sudden, I'm just worried about getting through the day, let alone changing the world. And I believe when we start having level four conversations and behavior in our mindset and our actions, we actually can change the world. And I want to do that. I know you do. And I believe people that are listening probably would love to have that commitment in their lives as well. So for me, level four is getting myself out of the way of life and letting all the good that is possible happen, and to have belief that my future is good. It's possible. Not only possible, it's probable if I just get out of my own way.
That's gorgeous. That's gorgeous. That's really inspirational, Stacey, because as you and I were talking before we began this podcast, you're a different guy than the story I had in my mind about who you were. And for that, I apologize, because the pettiness of my survival instinct out of my ego goes through life and puts people in boxes of attributes, and therefore they are this or that. And whatever box they go into, it's either something that I can identify with and is for me and with me, or the enemy, the other. And so I saw the great Stacey Harding, who was this really legendary figure in mortgage lending, who was the second in command at Cherry Creek Mortgage behind Jeff May, a whole gig getting started by Senator Bill Armstrong, one of the great human beings that's ever walked the earth and lived in Colorado as a longtime senator in Colorado, and his son Will. A great organization, and you were the guy that was there helping run that organization for decades. And frankly, now that I think about it, and I've never had this conscious thought, I was probably just jealous of the kind of power, the kind of influence, the kind of money you were making, and frankly, the recognition by others of the significance of your life compared to my little life. And so I had a story in my head that any guy who's this handsome, who's this knowledgeable, who's this influential and this wealthy is probably a jerk. He's probably a narcissistic, all that in a bag of chips jerk. And it was my petty way of having my ego be able to sit over in the corner and feel like, well, but I'm not all that, but at least I'm not that kind of thing. And then I do apologize to you, Stacey, because as I've gotten to know you, what I've found is the opposite of all that. I've found a warm-hearted, sincere, authentic, humble, open-minded servant of God, and not in a dogmatic religious way, but in an authentic spiritual way. So when you called me up and said, I don't know what you're doing, but let's talk because I've seen that there's other people that have gone through what you do here. And I'm at a place where I think I can use that. And then how quickly you went through it, embraced it, and made it your own, and now became a trainer for IMP. And we don't have many of those, and started your own company, Hourglass, to do just that. That's that's a gift to the world because I've watched you awaken your own level 4 from what was probably like 99% of the people on the planet, a level 3 singular option of existence of who you thought you were. And so, in brief, if people want to know more about what level 4 is, they can read my last book, Soul Experience, the 4th Level of Identity, or they can call you up or call me up and we can have a conversation about it. In short, it's basically one of 2 stages that happens for adults. There's 4 stages of identity, in my opinion. And the highest 2 stages are as adults, and most people, 98%, are level 3, which is ego-based identity, where we go through life really repackaging the story of our past experience in a way that we can present to the world so the world thinks a certain way about us, in hopes that that splashes back so that we can actually believe we are what we're telling the world we are. It's all Wizard of Oz stuff. And it's rooted in survival instinct and self-preservation, self-interest, and all that. But I was always perplexed, Stacey, by why did the avatars, the holy ones, say what they said? Why did Christ talk about this dynamic as he did? Why did Buddha? Why did Gandhi? Why did Mother Teresa? Why did they talk about better to give than receive? Yeah, right. What are you, crazy? What I give Stacey, I've got $1 and I give Stacey that $1, I'll starve. That's crazy talk. He can say that. He's the son of God, but I'm just a normal dude trying to get along, right?
Right.
Level 4 is the recognition of the wisdom of the avatars. Level 4 is your values personified in your life. Because when you and I are on our deathbed, and it's not too far away for you and I, when you and I are on a deathbed, what's really going to matter in that moment? Is it going to be the bank account? There's no more worries. You don't have to worry about whether you have enough money in the IRA to make it last. There is no more relationship politics going on of who is it that thinks this about me or that about me. It's going to come down to that final interview with the self of, did it matter that I was here? And what I was really blessed to come to out of great adversity in my life, I always thought I was so flawed that I was never going to be happy. I didn't realize the perfection of the larger design of God, source, universe, divinity, whatever you want to call it, that my screwed upness, my flaws, my perceived and real of my inadequacies, my insecurities, my not enough of, was all beautiful and perfect because it became the fertilizer of having to work on, why do I feel so questioning of life? Why do I feel so doubtful about the future? Why am I basically so unhappy, trying to be happy and often pretending to be happy? Who can I really trust when I'm at my low point and alone? And what are the answers here? And what that's led to is the last quarter century of me doing this work in essentially synthesizing the pragmatic wisdom of the holy ones to everyday life through their words, through the lens of the decision you and I and others have to make of being a personification of your values for that final interview on your deathbed to know that you mattered. Because Stacey was love, Stacey was kindness, Stacey was humility, Stacey was faith, and not the personality attributes that allows other people's egos to judge you and alienate you. So you, my friend, have come into my life, and you've been still another blessing in affirming the truth of this overall process that you and I are now helping other people find in IMP, that everyone listening to this podcast has a level 4 within them. They have values that they hold dear and precious, that they're going to measure their life by, that the people that show up at their funeral are going to say, Stacey was an embodiment of bup, bup, bup. Well, if we don't wait, because we may or may not get to listen to that, depending on your belief system, right? If we don't wait until we're gone for others to observe whether it mattered we're here or not, and instead we get ahead of the game and we start to proactively design the way we live our life based on who we remind ourselves we can be, personified values rather than defendant egos and insecure and miserable egos. If we design that ahead of time and live our life that way, I promise it's been an absolute miracle in my life. In the last 25 years, I've expanded my family to hundreds of people versus just the biological few. I have had the experience of God operating in the world, not in a religious sense, in a spiritual sense, through everybody, regardless of their belief system, even if they're atheists, and in seeing the larger macro picture. And I was allowed access to that by becoming aware of my level 4 and deciding what matters in this podcast with Stacey Hardy and with whoever hears this today is not whether you ever buy shit from me. I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for you to consider that the truth of what I'm saying is that there is someone within everybody listening to this that they probably aren't really consciously in touch with, much less practicing life through. And what you and I are doing that's so valuable and sacred, brother, is we're offering that to the world, access to people's own empowered self-identity. This would all sound like philosophic mumbo jumbo, but I've done this for a quarter century and done it with thousands of people. I've never had anyone go through it that didn't have a profound transformation out of this and the hundreds of others tools in the program. So an overly wordy, I'm Irish, so I tend to talk too much, an overly wordy presentation of it all, but that's sort of my initial response to you, brother. What do you think of all that?
Yeah, great description. And it's enlightening for people who will open their hearts and minds to that message and that truth of what we are like in our identities. And, I was thinking about as you're describing that depending on how people feel about how 2023 has gone for them, they could have a very different perspective going through the end of December into 2023. And oftentimes that has to do with how we're feeling, how others are interacting with us. Are they supporting us? Are they judging us? Are they putting pressure on us because maybe it's been a tough year economically? Because it has been for many industries.
Right.
There's a lot of fear going on in the world, and it's real. It's real for people. People that are listening may have lost loved ones most recently. I have a couple of friends who that has happened. It's hard.
Yeah.
And so how, as we go through the rest of this year, do we think about how could I respond to those emotions and feelings? You were sharing with me earlier today about some experience of different feelings that you've had this week that maybe weren't in your best interest, to be honest. But you were able to stop and reposition your thinking by asking yourself a simple question. And I think that's been really helpful for me, Al, when I've been thinking about doubts and fears. And I think, honestly, if people will be authentic with themselves, they don't have to be with you and I, but if people in the quiet of their own space will be honest with themselves, all of us have fear and anxiety and worry and doubt and maybe even depression. And there's a way for us to help people at this time of year to maybe put themselves in a position to cope with that. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to promise someone, if you'll do these things, all of this will disappear in your life. It's not true. We're human beings. I think we'll struggle with some of those things all of our life. But if there's some strategies and some wisdom that I think that we're trying to express, I think people can find they can balance those things, and maybe they don't endure as long and the suffering isn't as severe as it can be. So maybe you can share a little bit about just how you repossessed or repositioned, I should say, a question to yourself about how you were feeling or thinking.
Yeah, it's great. And I love the wisdom you just articulated. Yesterday, I was in a bad space. Now, I say that 40 years ago, when I was in a bad space, I'd be suicidal. Now, as I get older, I find something perhaps even worse. I become indifferent. I've moved from that dramatic desire, well, this is not going to work and I'll just end it all, to I don't really care. I'm just, whenever it's over, it's over. The sooner the better I can stop worrying. Indifference is arguably even a worse state than darkness, because you have to care. You have to care about your life. You have to care about the work. So I'm in this state yesterday, and if I just stayed in my level 3, I just feel blah. I feel like I've got coaching calls and I can't be that way on the calls. And so I hope I got to get out of this. I don't need to hope. I know I will, because I've done this so long that I know I will show up. And then ironically, the call would happen and I wouldn't be in that state, because I'd be in Stacey's world or Bob's world or Susie's world or whatever. And I truly care about what's going on in their world. And I'd sort of metaphorically put my arm around their shoulder and we talk about what they're looking at in life. And not because I know anything they don't know, I just remember things they may not remember. And so I'd hear their story of their darkness or what they're afraid of, jobs and relationships and all. I listened to it quietly, patiently, full on. I'm not busy thinking in my own mind, but as I can feel their pain, when they finally reach a point where they've exhausted it, it's kind of like Ali and Zaire with Foreman doing the rope-a-dope. You kind of lay back on the ropes and let them sort of spill out what their ego is thinking. And then you gently sort of suggest, well, here's an idea. What do you think about maybe this perspective? And then we start to recolor that landscape. And it's like a black and white picture that's becoming colorized into something now bright and with dimension and with possibility. And as I'm doing that with people, I forgot to practice my own indifferent depression. And so when I'd come out of these calls, I'd realize, I wasn't. And now it's like I put the depression back on like a cloak, because it was the habit of it. And then I noticed, I've noticed for many years this happens, that when I'm in Stacey's world on a call, I forget my own drama. I forget my own story, my own case against myself, my life, right? And so I thought, well, all right, so clearly it's not permanent and it's not real. It's just perceptual. What have you learned through the program and through your life to do? Well, several things. Primarily, I think it falls into 3 categories for me: physiologic, psychologic, and spiritual. Physiologic, well, how'd you sleep? I always start with this, and I'd ask people, listen to this, start with this. How'd you sleep last night? Well, not great. Okay, there's the first clue. Because when we don't sleep with enough sleep and enough deep sleep, enough REM sleep, we don't really do what we need to do to rebalance our brains, our minds, actually, bigger brain, our minds, to be set up psychologically, physiologically for the day. Our chemistry isn't great. So my chemistry wasn't great. All right, that's a big part of it. What do you do with that? Realize tonight I'm going to sleep great, and tomorrow I'll feel great, and today I do, and last night I did. And so that right there changes it to where it's not a state of permanence. It's a temporary state caused by physiologic, or at least enhanced by physiologic reasons. Second step is psychologic, CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Wonderful book I recommend to people called Feeling Good, the New Mood Therapy, Dr. David Burns. All about what to do with that. And what that's about is to notice what state you're in. So I stopped and said, well, what state I'm in? I'm in the state of fear or worry, okay? What is it that's creating that fear or worry? Some automatic thought I'm running. What's that automatic thought? Well, I'm afraid that blah, 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 whatever the details were. Okay. So that statement you're running over and over in your head is creating this feeling that you're misinterpreting as reality. All right. So what would, and I think of the 8 noble virtues that I have, right? Of love, compassion, faith, humility, wisdom, peace, truth, gratitude. I think of these 8 words. And I pick one of them and say, okay, well, so that state I'm describing of fear, doubt, anxiety, what's the opposite of that? Faith. So then I psychologically ask myself, what would faith be thinking right now? Mm-hmm. And Stacey, it's miraculous. I mean, even despite the physiologic limitation, I'm immediately thinking, Faith would be looking at all that I have and how grateful I should be, that leads to gratitude, how grateful I should be at the abundance I've been allowed. I have 3 meals a day. I have a house to live in. I have people to love who love me. I have companionship. I've had great experience over a lifetime and met wondrous people and wondrous experiences. I start thinking of all the things faith would remind me of. And faith on a go forward basis is lack of doubt. It can all be trusted. It's all perfect. And when we are suffering, it's only because we have forgotten the access point to the perspective that allows us to appreciate its perfection. It's all perfect and it can be trusted. And just the suggestion of that lifts the clouds, the fog, the sun breaks out, birds are tweeting, postman whistling, dogs barking, first day of summer. You're 5 years old and you're naked running through the meadow. That's level 4. Naked running through the meadow of a 4-year-old.
Well, that is a great description of what's possible. We've all realized this in our life, that the quality of our life often has to do with how we think, the quality of our thinking, the quality of our self-care, the quality of our self-compassion, the understanding that what other people say or think about us is irrelevant of who we really are. And as we go through the end of this year, I was just thinking as you're describing that, is that if there's anything that people could take away from this episode would be battle for your mind. Don't just let it run wild. Battle
Right.
for it.
Right.
And it's your heart that will help you control that mind.
Yeah.
But we can have trust in the future. We can have trust in our own abilities, and we can have trust in what the world has in store for us if we will just battle for our minds.
That's beautiful.
And I think when you are able to reposition or redirect your thoughts to what would faith think of this, or what would opportunity look like if I thought that way, it changes everything.
Yeah.
And I remember, I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard a story years ago that when President Reagan and Gorbachev were meeting and trying to deal with the Cold War, they were getting nowhere. And eventually, President Reagan said, "Gorby, let's go for a walk." And the physical change of how they were thinking, and in 20 minutes, they went for a walk and came back and had an agreement. And so sometimes I think we just have to get out of the state that we happen to be in that moment when we're having negative feelings, thoughts, doubts, concerns, fears, worry, anxiety, anger, judgment. Get up and change your physiology, physically change where you are, and that'll change your thinking as well.
That's beautiful. And, you know, as you're saying that, what I'm inspired to put on to this particular podcast for people is a couple of things. First of all, if there's anything anybody listening to this would like to hear us discuss about through a level 4 conversation, a level 4 perspective, let one of us know and we'll make sure we integrate that quickly into a podcast. Secondly, if there is anything about the way we're doing these podcasts that would work better for you, let us know and we'll make that adaptation. But most importantly, I have an offer for the people listening to this podcast, which just occurred to me, that I don't know about each of you, but it frankly annoys the hell out of me that the moment I wake up in the morning, there's people trying to sell me shit. I hate that. I really do hate that. I mean, I get on email and I've got 20 emails of people that are going to make me a good coach. And they don't know I've done it for 25 years at a high level. And they don't know me. They just are out there doing mass marketing. I get it. They need to make a living, but it offends me because it feels like an intrusion, and it feels sort of disrespectful that people haven't even taken the time to get to know me and my situation. They're just painting me with a broad brush. So anybody listening to this podcast that has any issue that they would like to talk to someone about, that may be a problem or it may be an opportunity. It may be huge, it may be small. I invite anybody listening to this to reach out to Stacey or me and give us a chance to help you see a different way of looking at it. We're not going to ask you for money. But not now. We do have a program that costs money, that's life-changing, life-transforming. We do offer coaching that costs money, but this is in a different category. We believe in a different approach to attracting people to a relationship of support, which is to earn it, and to frankly be something we sadly find too little of out there: authenticity of care, not just about what you're paying me, but because I really care about you. We care about whoever's listening to this that has enough courage to reach out to one of us and say, can we just have a conversation? And we'll have that conversation. And there will not be an invoice in the mail for the conversation. You don't have to be alone with whatever you're dealing with out there, because in Stacey Harding, you have somebody who I've been blessed to discover is somebody who has a great heart, great wisdom, great intention, and is somebody who frankly has been blessed by enough of his own challenges in life that he will have the power of humility working on your behalf to help you find answers, as has happened with me. So I know one person told you, Stacey, these podcasts are too long, so I think we're going to draw it to a close. But I do want people hearing it to know, I've asked people over and over, why do you keep calling? Because I'm very blessed to have very long-term coaching relationships with a lot of people. And you know what they tell me? They tell me because it's the only place I can come and have the conversation I really need to have. I can't have with anybody else, that stays confidential. It's the only place I can come where I'm met where I am. I'm met where I am, not where you think I should be, and met without judgment, and met with compassion and love, and invariably met with perspectives that remind me of how to trust life again. So that's my request and offer to people listening to this podcast. Stacey, I'll let you close it today, brother.
Yeah, thank you for that, Al. And we mean it. We just want to help. And we hope that you're finding value in this. And I'm certain we'll dial into more specific topics that will be of interest to people. But I know this, those of you listening, you have within you the power to change your world and change the world in a way that you would be delighted by. And so I know Al and I are committed to doing that. And I hope that we can be helpful in your journey to do so. So thanks, Al. Let's go change the world.
All right. All right. Blessings, brother. Bye-bye now.
Be well. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.